So here is my visual representation of the actors and policymakers that we learned about in the reading, and I decided to make this embedded within my own context. So here is Mount Vernon School District, which is the school district I work for. And they are governed locally by the Mount Vernon School Board, which consists of 5 members who live in Mount Vernon and do other things for work. So this is a volunteer elected position. And then over here we have Mount Vernon Education Association, which is our local union chapter. And so Mount Vernon Education Association is part of Washington Education Association Fourth Corner, which is kind of our local regional district. So when we do things like collective bargaining, we have lead bargainers and people from the region who come to help us with that. And then Washington Education Association is our state EA. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but Mount Vernon Education Association is in alignment with WEA in terms of values, goals, but is just the local chapter versus the state chapter. And then above that, we have the National Education Association, which of course is the national EA that incorporates all of the state EAs. So between the union and the school district, the big thing that happens is negotiations and collective bargaining. And so that produces outcomes like working conditions, salary, professional development, things like how many hours are in our contracted day, how many minutes do we get for recess and breaks, our health insurance policies, things like that. All of that is bargained for. And so the big actors when bargaining is happening are the union president and the bargaining team. And then the big actors on the district side when bargaining is happening are the superintendent, the director of categorical funding, which is the federal funding that we get for Title I and ELL migrant and bilingual funding, our chief financial officer who runs our budgets, and then the teaching and learning department who is in charge of curriculum, instruction, and all things related to that. Then the Mount Vernon School Board and the Mount Vernon School District work together to create and pass board policy, decisions about personnel, curriculum, funding, strategic planning. So they meet twice a month. We just passed a new board policy, and I was very involved in that process. And so it was really interesting to see kind of the formality of going through a first reading and a second reading and, moving to adopt the policy and going through the different iterations and kind of watching the mechanics of that work. And then lastly, down here at the bottom, all of these decisions affect what happens in schools and classrooms. And based on these policies and agreements made above, schools make their own policies, including attendance and behavior policies, maybe grading policies, maybe they make some curriculum decisions, they make, school improvement goals, things like that. And then in the classroom, teachers, have homework and grading policies that affect students, family, and the community. Teachers also might have communication policies or different partnerships in the community that they are leveraging to affect kids in the classroom. At the state level, I kept these 3 players. I kept these 3 players here at the bottom so that you can kind of see how the story plays out. But we have Washington State Legislature, so they pass laws, large scale funding, and broad policy. And a recent example of that is the McCleary decision that just passed in Washington State, which was the culmination of a lawsuit against Washington State for underfunding basic education. And so Washington State was under penalty, and they were paying, I don't know, some crazy fine every day that they didn't fully fund education. And so 2 years ago, they passed the McCleary decision, which claimed to fully fund basic education and put out a lot of money for teacher salaries. And so the I guess the biggest point that that illustrates is that Washington state legislature is very broad and very big, and a lot of control is left up to locals. And so each uh, each local EA, like Mount Vernon EA, had to bargain for the salaries, even though the state earmarked that money for salaries. They kind of put it out there and said, okay, school districts, you decide what to do with this. So there was a massive statewide, contention between districts and teachers, where teachers were laid off and cut, and they were their health care benefits were taken away. So it was a really, really big deal a couple of years ago. And then the Washington state legislature works in conjunction with and has oversight of the Office of the Superintendent for Public Instruction, OSPI, which is where, as a pre-service teacher, I had to log all of my testing, my hours. They issued my certificate. They are in charge of testing curriculum throughout COVID-19. They've been in charge of decisions made about how we would move forward with distance learning and things like that. And then Washington Education Association affects both the legislature and OSPI by lobbying for things that they believe in, and then endorsing candidates that are in alignment with their vision. And then this is meant to say federal level or national level, we have Mount Vernon School District down here. We have the OSPI right here, and then Washington State Legislature. The federal government, through the passage of things like ESSA and NCLB, have pull on policies that are made at the state level, specifically around finances. So if a school district or if a state legislature is accepting federal monies, there are accountability measures and stipulations attached to that money. And then big school reform like NCLB and ESSA, like we talked about. And then another interesting thing that happens is that at the national level, National Education Association is also lobbying Congress, and then endorsing candidates for election that are in alignment with their vision and goals. And then throughout this whole system, the courts uphold and interpret law and legality connected to really all stages of, or all of these elements. So it could be around a policy, around a practice, around how finances and money are being implemented, around student civil rights, all of that. So that is my visual representation.